Color Sergeant, march on the colors.
Color party, attention. Color party, carry colors. Color party, quick march. Color party, halt. Color party, order colors.
Okay. We will now sing the national anthem. Music, please. Native land, true patriot love, in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, a true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. During the silence, we will remember those who have passed on since we last gathered together. Veteran Wayne Bruce will now lead us in the act of remembrance with student Lachlan Shute to do the commitment to remember.
They shall not grow old as we are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
They served, giving freely of themselves. To them we pledge, amid the winds of time, to carry their torch and never forget. We will remember them.
We will remember them. Color Sergeant, deposit colors.
Color party, deposit colors.
MPP is here now.
Color party, quick march. Color party, mark time. Color party, halt.
Please be seated. As usual, poppies fall off. Good afternoon. I'm Gloria Habart, Chair of the Board of the Billy Bishop Museum. Welcome here to honoring local veterans at the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 6 on the traditional ancestral lands of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, which comprises the Saugeen First Nation and the Chippewas of Nawash, unceded First Nation. Let's not forget the people that were here first. When I mentioned to a friend the other day that I was working on my speech for this, he said, "I thought you just did the same thing." Well, he's not completely wrong. I do try to write something different, but my message is the same. I would like everyone to think about our veterans and serving members of the armed services throughout the year. Not wait until this time of remembrance to think about veterans and their families. We should support organizations like the Legion that help our veterans, or to reach out to a friend or neighbor who has a loved one posted far away. See if someone needs any kind of support. And share the history of our armed forces with younger people, like what we do at the museum with our school tours and other programs for the children. At the Billy Bishop Museum, our Veterans Committee meets throughout the year to decide who we should honor. It's hard because there are so many to choose from. As we look at the candidates, we talk about what they have done, their fate, and their families. We remember them. This year we feature 10 veterans, 1 woman and 9 men. They are of different faiths and backgrounds, served at different times and places, had many different roles. They all did their duty, and I'm proud of them all. But today to me represents more than just them. To me, this is a way to honor everyone who served in the two great wars and Korea, through the Cold War, the Balkans, Afghanistan, and every other peacekeeping and war mission we were on, and the people who serve now. Everywhere Canada was needed and is needed, in war and peace, at home and abroad. I wish we could honor each one individually, but we'd be here for decades if we tried. So let's take this afternoon to thank all the ordinary men and women of the Navy, Army, Air Force, Merchant Marine, and to honor their families who also serve. So, my friend, I guess I did say the same thing every year. Always remember. And now I'd like to turn things over to Dave Alexander, Chair of the Veterans Committee and Vice Chair of the Billy Bishop Museum Board of Directors. Dave?
Thank you, Gloria. By the way, that was not me to tell her to change her speech. She's very good at making speeches, as we just found out. Veterans, viewers, and friends, welcome to this year's Honoring Our Local Veterans. We are pleased to be at Branch 6 Royal Canadian Legion for this event and having it televised on Rogers Television. This is the 24th edition of this program in which we have honored over 240 local veterans from Bruce and Grey counties. On this occasion, we have marked the 80th anniversary of the breaching of the Gothic Line in Italy, D-Day and the Battle of Normandy, and the Battle of the Scheldt. In fact, many of the posthumous recognitions today will be related to the above battles and the two exhibits presently featured at the Billy Bishop Museum, In Their Steps Through Their Eyes, and Crusaders Serving the World Going to War with the Royal Canadian Air Force. The Crusaders exhibit was developed in recognition of the 100th anniversary of the creation of the RCAF. Finally, let us also remember that Canada withdrew military forces from Afghanistan 10 years ago. We have some special guests today. Helen Downing Hunter is with us to recognize her father, Flying Officer James Downing. Lila Johnson, the sister of Private Alfred McLeod, and Trooper Jack McLeod is here to represent her brothers who were killed in action during the Second World War. Warrant Officer Cameron Bruce of the Grey and Simcoe Foresters will be representing Warrant Officer Harold Burr. We also have other special guests, including students from Owen Sound District Secondary School, to help us honor these veterans, many of whom lost their lives to war. Warrant Officer Harold Burr, Paratrooper Clarence Lapierre, Trooper J.J. McLeod, Private Alfred McLeod, and Flying Officer Moses Rabowski will be the subject of this year's They Serve for Us memorial markers, which will soon be erected at Jervis Bay Memorial Park. Friends and veterans, it's a great privilege to introduce this year's of Honoring Our Local Veterans. There is no doubt that this group of veterans we will recognize today contributed much to make this country great. They are a diverse group, having served in different branches of the armed forces in distant locales around the world. They left their civilian lives and loved ones behind to embark upon an uncertain journey from which they were not assured they would return. One thing they did have in common was a commitment and a desire to serve their country. This theme will become very evident as we introduce each of our honorees today. Warrant Officer Harold Burr, trained at Camp Borden for 3 years, reaching the rank of Warrant Officer Class 2, becoming Regimental Quartermaster, RQMS. As the RQMS, Burr was responsible for functioning equipment, assisted in the ordering, storing, and distribution of items such as rations and clothing and tents. Warrant Officer Burr was absorbed into the 26th Army Tank Regiment, that was the reconstituted Grey and Simcoe Foresters, in 1942, and arrived in the United Kingdom with them on June 26, 1943. Upon their dispersal, he was transferred to the 10th Armored Regiment, the Fort Garry Horse. They landed in France on D-Day. Warrant Officer Burr arrived in France on June 19, 1944, as a reinforcement for the regiment. The 10th Armored Regiment participated in Operation Totalize, the first major operation planned by 1st Canadian Army in Normandy. The objective was to close the Falaise Gap by breaking through the German defenses south of Caen and capturing the city of Falaise. At the beginning of the operation, squadrons of the United States 8th Army Air Force bombed German positions, providing protection for the advancing armored columns of 2nd Canadian Corps. Harold Burr was killed on the second day of Operation Totalized, August 8th, when supply vehicles of B Echelon were bombed accidentally by Allied aircraft. In a horrible miscommunication in air-to-ground signals, the flare color used for identifying the targets was yellow, as was the flare color for identifying Allied units. The mistake of flare colors cost Burr and 5 other members of the Fort Garry Horse their lives. I should mention hundreds of others, too. Harold Harrison Burr was buried in Bretteville-sur-Laise Canadian War Cemetery, France. It is fitting that Warrant Officer Cameron Bruce of the Grand Simcoe Foresters is representing Warrant Officer Burr today. Warrant Officer Bruce is a veteran of Afghanistan and the son of the former commanding officer of the Grand Simcoe Foresters, Lieutenant Colonel Wayne Bruce, retired. May we offer a moment of silence for Warrant Officer Burr. Flying Officer James Downing enlisted for service with the Royal Canadian Air Force on October 18, 1941. The RCAF interviewing officer described him as, quote, somewhat underweight but fit, temperament good, bit on the small side, and quite boyish, but should improve with training, end quote. Flying Officer Downing piloted an Avro Lancaster that weighed 68,000 pounds when fully loaded on takeoff with a wingspan of 102 feet, powered by 4 Rolls-Royce Merlin engines. F.O. Downing and his crew of LM-107 of No. 12 Squadron, Royal Air Force, were, quote, reported missing on the 9th of 29 July 1944 as a result of air operations against Stuttgart, Germany, end quote. A later report found, quote, at 100 hours on the 29th of July 1944, a 4-engine bomber crashed about 800 yards north of Diane-Capelle, France. The aircraft was on fire before the crash, and it exploded on impact, end quote. A 1/2 square mile debris field surrounded the crash site of LM-107, and it was in such a state of destruction that it was difficult to initially determine the make of the aircraft. The diminutive RCAF recruit, James Downing, made good on the interviewing officer's belief that he would improve with training by becoming the pilot of a Lancaster bomber. But sadly, he left behind a spouse and a newborn child. He is buried with his crew in a communal grave at Calloy War Cemetery in Meurthe-et-Moselle, France. Today, his daughter, Helen Downing Hunter, is representing him at this ceremony. Could we please recognize Flying Officer Downing with a moment of silence? Private Charles Golden enlisted with the 160th Bruce Battalion on December 29, 1915 at Wyerton, Ontario. Upon arriving overseas in the United Kingdom, he quickly climbed the ranks at Whitley Camp. On June 2, 1917, Golden was promoted to the rank of corporal, and 6 days later, he was promoted to sergeant. On February 10, 1918, Charles Golden contracted necrotizing gingivitis, a painful infection of the gums. Upon his leave from hospital, he was transferred to a reserve battalion and reverted to the rank of private. On August 18, 1918, Private Golden was transferred to the Canadian Motor Machine Gun Brigade Pool in France. He subsequently joined the 2nd Canadian Motor Machine Gun Brigade. The unit participated in the 100-day campaign, which brought an end to the First World War. The brigade was often involved in removing hostile forces near the front lines by supporting the assaulting troops. It was an evolving type of mobilized warfare, with heavy machine guns being mounted on armored motorized vehicles. Private Charles Golden arrived on the Western Front near the beginning of the 100-day campaign. His casualty active service form indicated that he had joined the 2nd CMMG Brigade in the field, that being France, on August 29, 1918. The Canadian Corps, consisting of 4 divisions, were being used as spearhead troops, pushing the enemy lines back towards Germany. Given the new mobility associated with the war, the 2nd Canadian Motor Machine Gun Brigade would play several roles, including direct skirmishes and assaults on enemy troops and outposts, and indirect fire, creating a barrage effect over enemy lines. Private Golden remained with the 2nd CMMG Brigade for the duration of the war. He was officially discharged in May 1919. Today, Charles' grandson, Lance Golden, is representing him at this ceremony. Could we please recognize Private Golden with a moment of silence? Private Thomas Albert Golden. I should mention they are brothers, the Golden brothers, from Tobermory. Enlisted with the 160th Bruce Battalion on February 16, 1916. He arrived in England on October 29, 1916, aboard the SS Matagama, and spent the rest of the year training with the 160th, during which time he was appointed acting corporal. He reverted to private when he transferred to the 2nd Canadian Pioneer Battalion. He arrived in France on March 1st, 1918. He was wounded near Arras, France on April 12th, 1918. He suffered a gunshot wound to his right buttock, which lodged shrapnel in his pelvis and fractured his sacrum. First treated by the 6th Canadian Field Ambulance, he was subsequently taken to No. 4 Canadian General Hospital in Basingstoke, England, where he spent 76 days. Thomas then was invalided back to Canada on October 14, 1918. In Canada, he was first admitted to Guelph Military Convalescent Hospital, where he was then transferred to a military hospital in London, Ontario, where he would undergo a series of surgeries, ultimately spending just under a year for all this medical care. Thomas Golden was given an honorable discharge on October 28, 1919, being declared medically unfit. Thomas Golden's First World War personnel file is 140 pages long, which is much longer than the average file. Much of his file documents the treatments he received for the shrapnel wound to his right buttock. The treatment would have been a painful ordeal for Thomas, as one medical document dated October 20th, 1919 stated, quote, wounded April 12th, 1914, right sacrum fractured. Wound has discharged ever since that date. 3 operations have been done in an effort to remove the foreign body and clean the wound. They did not achieve their desired result, end quote. The Great War was a painful, changing life experience for Thomas Golden. Today, Bert's grandniece, Debbie Thornton, is representing him at this ceremony. Could we please recognize Private Golden with a moment of silence? Aircraftman Evelyn Johnson. Her married name is Bewley. Enlisted for service at Medicine Hat, Alberta on January 28, 1951. She was sent to Saint Jean, Quebec for basic training and subsequently transferred to RCAF Station Clinton, where she hoped to qualify as an air traffic controller. As fate would have it, there were not enough recruits to create a class. Aircraft woman Johnson was alternatively assigned gate duties and sent to London, Ontario on weekends as military police with a fellow sergeant to have a presence and patrol the streets to ensure good behavior by visiting RCAF personnel. Evelyn's older brother had volunteered for the Royal Canadian Air Force during the Second World War. She remembers putting together care packages for servicemen who were posted overseas. Evelyn also collected scrap metal and meat bones for the war effort. These experiences encouraged her to enlist for military service. As she noted, quote, "I was and am very patriotic. At 16, I was not old enough to join the war. So I joined afterwards when I was old enough. I went on leave, met my husband, and the rest is history." Could we please have a round of applause for Aircraft Woman Johnson? Owen Sound District Secondary student Tom Mackay will introduce paratrooper Clarence Lapierre.
Clarence Lapierre was 20 years old when he enlisted with the 48th Highlanders of Canada on January 21st, 1943. Soon thereafter, he was transferred to the Queen's Own Rifles of Canada and embarked for England on June 2nd, 1943. In August of 1943, Lapierre transferred to the 1st Canadian Parachute Battalion, becoming one of its only black members. Lapierre was attached to C Company on April 2nd, 1944, and continued training in England as they prepared for their role in the D-Day landings. The 1st Canadian Parachute Battalion deployed to France on June 6, 1944, D-Day, as part of the British 6th Airborne Division. Paratrooper Lapierre was with C Company under the command of Major H.M. McLeod. C Company was dropped west of the River Deves. The company was tasked with securing the drop zone and then advancing on the fortified position at the Chateau in Varville, where they were to destroy a radio tower. The Chateau at Varville was heavily defended, including a concrete pillbox and multiple mortar emplacements. As the remaining platoons of C Company arrived at Varville, they came under heavy mortar and machine gun fire. They achieved their second objective when the German troops occupying the pillbox and Chateau surrendered. 42 German prisoners were taken by C Company. The company, though successful in its objectives, suffered heavy casualties on June 6, including their commanding officer, Major McLeod. Paratrooper Lapierre was reported to have suffered wounds while engaging the enemy during these actions. Paratrooper Lapierre, Clarence David Lapierre, died June 7th of these wounds. He was buried in Brandville British Cemetery. The inscription on his headstone reads, "May some kind hand lay flowers for me, fondly remembered by mother and dad." Today, Lisa Lapierre is representing Clarence at this ceremony. Could we please recognize Paratrooper Lapierre with a moment of silence?
Thank you, Tom. I should mention that Tom traveled to Normandy this past June with a group of students from OSDSS, where he made a graveside tribute, basically what you just heard now, to Paratrooper Lapierre at Ranville War Cemetery. I should also mention that a group of students did find some flowers, and they did lay those flowers by the grave as requested. Chief Petty Officer Robert Larson enlisted in the Royal Canadian Navy on March 19, 1951 at Vancouver. After serving on the East Coast aboard HMCS Crescent, he departed for the Korean War aboard HMCS Athabaskan as a gunner in October 1952. During his 14-month tour in Korea, he trained as a diver. Upon return to Canada in January 1954, he commenced a full-time sea naval diving career, eventually becoming a clearance diver where he dealt with explosive disposal assignments. In 1970, he trained as a submersible submarine pilot for the Navy's first submersible, SDL-1. In 1976, he was appointed chief of the military bomb disposal team for water events at the Montreal Olympics, which were held, these events were held in Kingston, Ontario. That same year, he was posted as chief diver to the experimental diving unit at the Defense and Civil Institute of Environmental Medicine, that is the DCIEM, at CFB Toronto. In 1980, he retired from the military, taking a position as the civilian manager of the Navy's Saturation Diving Complex at DCIEM. Robert took a year off to work with Simon Fraser University, operating their new hyperbaric facility. He returned to DCIEM as the hyperbaric operations officer in 1982. From 1976 to 1993, Robert operated Toronto General Hospital's hyperbaric chamber on an as-required call-out basis. During nights and weekends, he officially retired in 1993 at age 60. Today, Robert's son, Randy Larson, is representing him at this ceremony. Could we please offer a moment of silence for Chief Petty Officer Larson? Thank you. I would like to call upon the Billy Bishop Museum's curator, Morgan Woodhouse, to introduce Private Alfred McLeod.
Private Alfred McLeod enlisted with the Perth Regiment on September 28, 1939, less than 3 weeks after Canada declared war on Germany. He was first attached to the machine gun platoon and completed much of his training at Cape Borden. One special task assigned to Private McLeod was to take part in a military display with the Ford Company of military vehicles at the Canadian National Exhibition grounds in August of 1941. After a year of training in Canada, the Perth Regiment, including Private McLeod, embarked overseas to the United Kingdom in October of 1941. As part of the 11th Brigade of the 5th Canadian Armoured Division, the Perth Regiment was transferred to Italy in 1943. Along with the 1st Canadian Infantry Division, the 5th Canadian Armoured Division formed the 1st Canadian Corps in Italy. The Perths were first committed to battle in January of 1944. In anticipation of upcoming amphibious operations at Anzio, the British 8th Army, including the 1st Canadian Corps, were ordered to maintain sufficient pressure on enemy forces to ensure that the Germans would not move into the Anzio sector. The 11th Canadian Infantry Brigade were ordered to cross the Riccio River and advance towards the Arieli River just north of Ortona on January 17, 1944. This was the Perth Regiment's baptism of fire in Italy, where they faced intense machine gun fire and heavy mortar and artillery fire as they attempted to advance across the river valley. A fellow soldier of this attack lamented, "We were all in a state of shock over the events of the day, knowing that besides losing the battle, we'd also lost a hell of a lot of our buddies." It was during this action that Private McLeod was killed. 46 other members of the Perth Regiment lost their lives that day. Private Alfred McLeod is buried in the Moro River Canadian War Cemetery in San Donato, Italy. Representing Private McLeod today is his sister, Lila Johnson. Can we please offer a moment of silence for Private McLeod?
Thank you, Morgan. Morgan and our intern, Jack, have been working on a First Nations Veterans project. We will share more about this project in the future. Owen Sound District Secondary School student Lachlan Shute will introduce Private Jack McLeod.
At 19, on June 17, 1940, Private Jack McLeod enlisted with the Gray and Simcoe Foresters in Owen Sound. Many positive comments were made about him throughout his testing and training. The auditing officers noted a number of times that, quote, Jack appeared quite intelligent and a quiet boy with a good appearance. After training at Camp Borden, Trooper McLeod left for England on June 15, 1943. When the Grey and Simcoe Foresters were disbanded in August of 1943, he became a member of the 6th Armored Regiment, more commonly known as the 1st Hussars. McLeod saw his first action on D-Day. The 1st Hussars landed on the western half of Juneau in support of the 7th Infantry Brigade. After suffering heavy casualties on the beach, the 1st Hussars were left with only 13 tanks. Following the bloody battle for Caen, they moved further south of the city to provide armored support for the next battle, codenamed Operation Spring. On July 25th, the 2nd Canadian Infantry Division launched an attack on Verrières Ridge with support from the 1st Hussars. They would face heavy resistance as they attempted to seize the higher ground. Trooper McLeod was a member of C Squadron, and according to their event logs of the day, quote, C Squadron was strafed by friendly aircraft. McLeod was wounded during this incident. Upon arrival at the field hospital, he had minor injuries, with his conditions marked as, quote, fairly good. He was then transferred to number 121 British General Hospital, RAMC, located near Bayeux, where his wounds were treated and shell fragments removed. On July 27th, while receiving further treatment for these wounds and second-degree burns to his hands, the patient, quote, suddenly collapsed and died. Trooper Jack Joseph McLeod was only 23 years old. In 1972, Mary Louise McLeod, Jack and Alfred's mother, was chosen to represent all Silver Cross mothers of Canada and lay a wreath at the National War Memorial in Ottawa during the Remembrance Day ceremony, on behalf of those who had lost children in the World Wars. She was the first Indigenous woman to be given the honor of being the National Silver Cross Mother. Representing Private McLeod today is his sister Lila Johnson. Could we please offer a moment of silence for Trooper McLeod?
Thank you for sharing that. It's an interesting intersection of history that we have Lila here, who knew these two brothers that we're talking about, and Lila goes with her mother for that ceremony. And then we have Lachlan and Tom here, who researched these individuals and then went overseas and stood graveside by these individuals to read their tributes. So I know I'm even quite moved by that. Thank you, Lachlan. Flying Officer Moses Rabowski enlisted with the Royal Canadian Air Force in June 1942, where he qualified as an air bomber. He arrived in the United Kingdom in September of 1943, where he completed further training before being attached to number 429 Squadron of the Royal Canadian Air Force. F.O. Rabowski had an impressive military career. Quote, he graduated air bomber at Crumlin in July last year, and shortly after his graduation, received his commission as a pilot officer. Going overseas, he received a promotion to flying officer only a short time ago. It is known to his family here, Owen Sound, that he had been on several bombing missions over Germany and German-occupied territory, end quote. Flying Officer Rabowski's parents received a telegram on May 28, 1944, informing them their son had gone missing during a bombing operation over the European continent. The young Jewish airman from Owen Sound was the bomb aimer aboard Halifax MN-293 of number 429 Squadron, RCAF, that was destined on an operation for Leopoldsburg, Belgium, for a bombing attack. It would be later confirmed for the Rabowski family that their son and brother had been killed in action. Bomber Command was attacking strategic targets in preparation for D-Day, which included the military camp at Leopoldsburg. Rabowski, being Jewish, risked even more than his fellow airmen flying missions into Germany and occupied Europe. If he bailed out and was captured, he would face the wrath of an anti-Semitic enemy. It was later determined that Flying Officer Rabowski's Halifax had crashed, killing the entire crew. He was buried at Heverlee War Cemetery, Belgium. Today, Bruce Ronald is representing Moses at this ceremony. Could we please recognize Flying Officer Rabowski with a moment of silence? Thank you. Even though the Billy Bishop Museum documents and perpetuates the memory of Air Marshal William Avery Bishop, it is also part of our mandate to honor the service and sacrifice of all former serving members of the Canadian Armed Forces, including these veterans today. Gloria mentioned that in her speech. By extension, we also honor the service and sacrifice of current serving members of the Canadian Armed Forces. It is of particular interest to note that this group of veterans in front of us today have been awarded more than 30 medals, and this does not account for any other honors that may have been bestowed upon them. Next year will be our 25th anniversary of honoring our local veterans, and we are planning a special event for this occasion. Thank you to the members of the Veterans Committee for your organizational efforts. Thank you to Branch 6, Royal Canadian Legion, for hosting us. They went above and beyond to have us in here today, believe me. Thank you to Mark Perry and his crew from Rogers TV for televising this ceremony. Thank you to our student volunteers for helping us today. Thank you to Levante Living, including Kelso Villa, the Canadian Veteran Freedom Riders, Meaford Unit, and Veterans Affairs Canada for their support of HOLV. Thank you to our veterans' families for supporting them in this endeavor. Thank you to our veterans for your service to Canada, participating in this event, and especially for sharing your stories with us. Their plaques will be on display in our community at the Harry Lumley Bayshore Community Center, Owen Sound District Secondary School, and MP Alex Ruff's Owen Sound office. Finally, thank you, the viewers, for watching this special broadcast today. May I now introduce Branch 6 Royal Canadian Legion President Ed Yates.
Thank you, Dave. Veterans, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. The Royal Canadian Legion has a mission statement. Statement 1 is lending aid and help to veterans and their families when needed, wherever needed. Mission statement number 2 is to promote remembrance wherever possible. One of the unwritten missions of the Royal Canadian Legion, the room we're standing in today, due to circumstances beyond our control, is our club room. Every Legion branch across Canada has a club room. It is not the public area of the building. It is the place where comradeship takes place amongst the veterans, amongst the members. So in the finest tradition of that comradeship, today I would like to welcome you all to Branch 6 of the Royal Canadian Legion in Owen Sound. Thank you, everyone.
They messed up my notes. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Morgan, and thank you, Wayne, for that. I read these plaques and I saw those biographies before, but just hearing them read is just, whoa. Give me a moment here. It's such an honor to listen to the stories of all. Now, Bruce Gray, Owen Sound MPP, Rick Byers is here, and we'd like to say a few words.
Well, thank you very much, Gloria and Dave, and thank you all for being here this afternoon. My pleasure to bring greetings on behalf of the province to this wonderful event, and it is truly a wonderful event honoring these amazing veterans. And hearing the stories and the backgrounds and the biographies just makes it all the more real for all of us, and the sacrifice and the commitment they gave to give us all a better life. Truly, thank you for all the work that's gone into making this such a terrific event. And thank you to the representatives here and Aircraft Woman Evelyn as well. Thank you for all being here to represent these extraordinary veterans. My pleasure to have Lisa Lapierre here as well. We work together in the office here in Owen Sound, and thank you, Lisa. But thank you all for being here to make it extra special for us. Thank you very much again for a fantastic event this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. And now, Deputy Mayor Owen Sound, Scott Gregg, is here to bring greetings from the city.
Well, thank you very much. And if you continue to get emotional, just call me up. We'll be emotional together, Gloria. This is a super special day, and it's an extreme pleasure for me to be able to represent Mayor and Council and bring congratulations from the city to those who are being recognized and acknowledged today for the sacrifices which were made and continue to be made by serving members in the search for and the preservation of peace. Today reminds us all it comes with a significant cost, and we must always remember that. Thank you also to the Billy Bishop Museum, to the Owen Sound Legion, to the teachers, and to the students, and to everyone here today watching and participating, and for those watching at home, because this is one of the most special events of the year, during one of the most special times of the year. And we all appreciate your extreme efforts to make sure that we never, ever forget. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. And now we have Honorary Colonel Al Jones of the Gray and Simcoe Foresters.
Thank you, Gloria, and the committee for this outstanding day that we have going here. My biggest takeaway about today is this community, the community of Gray. I had the opportunity to see the students do their presentations in Meaford, and I can't help but be impressed by the support this community gives to the veterans of the past, those who are serving today, and those who will serve tomorrow. I share that because the Foresters, at the end of 2025, the fourth quarter of 2025, will be deployed to Latvia. And in the first quarter of 2026, they will also be deployed. I say that because it's really important that our community supports the men and women who will be traveling overseas representing Canada. It is an exceptional mission that they're taking on. It is a great deployment that they're taking on. And much the same as the individuals here, they are going to need the support of their family and their support of their community. I want to thank you for everything that you've done for those here today, those who are serving now, and those that will serve in the future. So on behalf of the Gray and Simcoe Foresters, hats off to all of you for the work that you've done in this community. So thank you.
Thank you, Colonel Jones. Before we wrap things up for this year, I have a few announcements. We have veteran surveys available, I believe, today, and tree of remembrance forms. If we don't have any here today, just check in with the museum for that. The museum is going to be dressed up for Christmas again this year. It's always wonderful to see how it might have been back in the days, Victorian days, Edwardian days, and when Billy was a boy there. Staff and volunteers do a really good job about that. Check out our website, billybishopmuseum.org, for more details and for information about our Christmas activities that we're planning. We also have the opportunity for anyone that's interested to book private teas, or if you want a space for a little meeting, just contact us and we'll see what we can do for you. And ladies, Fire and Ice fundraising gala will be held on May 9th in 2025. It's always a great time with a good opportunity to get together with friends and to have a good meal and have some fun. Here, the Ladies Auxiliary have provided some refreshments for us, and thank you very much for that. The offerings are always, always very good. So we want you to stay afterwards and enjoy that. And there will be a bar serving alcoholic beverages open in the North Atlantic room afterwards. I think you have to go through the museum here to get to that room, and you have to consume the beverages there. I'm sorry, you can't come back here. So, but that's all right. We can make that work. We can make that work. So I want to just say merci, miigwech. Thank you for all of you being here today for this important and emotional event. It's one I look forward to every year. I think it's one of the most important things that we do at our museum, to keep the memory alive, to honor all those people, to keep the history alive, and to share the history of other people. As Dave mentioned, the plaques are going to be all over the area, including at the, I believe, the Owen Sound attack hockey game on November the 10th. They'll be there, and some of us will be there too to share information with you. And I hope to see you all next summer at our plaque return ceremony, when the plaques will go to their permanent homes with the families of those who are honored here today. Again, check out our website for all these details of all we do at the museum. And now, Color Sergeant, would you retrieve the colors?
Color party, attention. Color party, quick march.
Oh, I should have them stand.
Color party, halt.
Please stand if you are able for,
Party, retrieve colors.
oh, pardon me. We will now sing God Save the King. Color Sergeant. Colors.
Color party, carry colors. Color party, quick march.
Thank you all for being here today, and please stay, enjoy the refreshments, and meet with our veterans. Thank you again, and see you next year.
Met or exceeded expectations.